Hey, thanks for watching my video. Today we're going to put a new front tire on a KTM RC8. RC8 has got to be one of the coolest bikes out there. First thing we're going to do is we're going to break loose the front axle bolt. Next we are going to loosen the pinch bolts. There are two on each side. Do get your Torx socket kit out because you are going to need it for this bike. So jumping over onto the right hand side, we're going to loosen the Torx pinch bolts. Makes it a lot easier getting that axle out of the forks when the pinch bolts are loosened. Okay, so now they are loose. Now let's go to work on the calipers. We're going to start with the left side, again with the Torx bolts. This would have been a great time for KTM to use a 12 millimeter like the Japanese bikes have, or a 13 millimeter like a BMW has. These Torx bolts, just a little awkward getting the tool onto the bolt. As you see, there's not a whole lot of room there. Maybe better if I didn't have it on the front stand. If I had it on the ground and I could turn the bars, I could get to them easier. I think if this were my personal bike, I would probably replace these bolts with the titanium bolts with a regular like 6-point head on it. That way I could just use a regular socket wrench to get it off. And these bolts are actually in there pretty good. I want to say when I pulled them out, whoever originally did it, or maybe did it last time or sometime along the line, they put some blue Loctite on the threads. Not a fan. Brake calipers typically do not need Loctite. It's better for you if you don't use the Loctite. Anyway, so we're almost done with the second caliper bolt. Maybe I should have cut this out. Made you think that this video was going to go really quick. Or if anything, cut off the right side. But there you go. There's the left side. Brake pads look pretty good. So now let's jump over to the right side of the bike. There's a good look at the right side. And then we just break them free and loosen them up. I'm almost out of things to talk about on this bike. And this is kind of tedious here. Just remove bolts. Loosen bolts, remove bolts. Loosen bolts, remove bolts. Well, like I said, if this had a regular bolt head on it, these bolts would already be out of the bike. It's hard enough to get Torx to line up, and then to get the socket to stay in the bolt while you're loosening it is just kind of a miracle in itself. This might have been one of those jobs where I should have pulled out my air ratchet and let the tool do all the work for me. But when it comes to motorcycles, I'm not a real big fan of using air tools. As you've noticed from some of my other videos, about the only time I use an air tool is when I know there's going to be a counter shaft sprocket bolt, which is just on there so tight that there's no way that I'm ever going to get it off using hand tools. An example would be like a 2010 Yamaha R1. That counter shaft bolt is really hard to get off that thing if it was put on by the factory. So here we go. Now we got the right side off. What I like to do is give the caliper a little bit of a twist, and you saw in there that the brake pads on the right side are good also. Now we jump onto that axle nut, and with that axle nut you kind of want to give it a little give the axle a little push through before you pull it all the way out. And this axle was very easy to move. I gave it a little push with my finger, and it came out pretty easily. It came out about 4 inches on the right side of the bike, which made it easy to pull out once I got my hand on it. So my problem there was I had a spacer in the way. So I just took my breaker bar and just pushed it through. So with the front wheel off and the spacers removed out of the wheel, it's time to remove the Schrader valve and let the air out. I know you're looking at my tire machine. My tire machine is a Derek Weaver machine. This Derek Weaver tire changer is the same exact machine if you were to go out and buy a Coates baseline. The only difference is this one is over $2,000 cheaper than the Coates baseline. The nice thing is the parts on the Derek Weaver are the same as the Coates baseline. So you're basically getting the same as the Coates baseline, just cheaper. So we want to look at which direction the tire's going. There's usually an arrow on the rotor, and I'm just going to put an arrow on the rotor itself in black magic marker so I can see it clearly. You don't want to make mistakes when it comes to putting a tire on backwards. It's not going to do the rider any favors by putting the rubber on backwards, especially if they hit a puddle. So now we're just braking the bead. If you can see behind me, there's a Coates 220. Behind me I have 2 tire machines in this workshop. And I'm so glad that I no longer have to use a Coates 220 to do motorcycle tires. It's kind of my backup machine. If anything happens to my Derek Weaver, while I'm waiting for my Derek Weaver to get fixed, I can always change tires by hand manually. But again, I don't ever want to change tires manually. That Coates 220 is the machine that taught me how to change motorcycle tires. My friend Dave Prass, rest in peace, taught me how to use a Coates 220 almost 40 years now, 40 years ago. So I've more than changed my share of tires in the last 40 years. And I'd like to say I'm pretty good at it. I like to brag that I treat other people's motorcycles as if they were my own. So if I'm doing your tires, I am not out there trying to scratch your wheel up like some of these other motorcycle shops do. And it's pretty much because I'm not a motorcycle shop. I'm not a business. I'm not trying to get rich off you. I don't have to keep my lights on with the money that I get from you. The money I take in from doing tires only covers my tools. It covers getting rid of the tires. If I change a tire and you've never been to my shop before, I replace the valve stems with 90-degree valve stems. It makes it easier to get past the rotor, to add air, check air. I don't know why more shops don't do it. It's only a couple dollars for a 90-degree valve stem. But if I'm doing your tires, I think you're worth it. So here we are. This is the new tire. And I'm looking at the arrows, the way the direction the arrows is. That dot tells me that the tire needs to line up with the valve stem. That is a wives' tale. There is a good write-up on the Tire Rack website where they've debunked the light spot of the wheel with the dot on the tire. Great tire companies like Michelin don't even bother to put a dot on the tire anymore. There's a wives' tale on that one as well that says you're supposed to line the barcode that's on the bead of the tire with the tire valve. But again, no, that's not that important. And the way I do it when I'm installing a tire is when I go to balance a tire and it takes more than like 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces of weights to balance the wheel, then I need to just go ahead and dismount the tire and spin it 180, and usually that'll get the weight down. I don't like putting more than maybe 1.25 ounces on a wheel, and I really like it when I put a tire on a wheel and it only takes like 1/4 ounce. That's when I know that the tire is really good. So I just filled up the tire until I heard both beads pop, and then I went ahead and I inspected both sides of the tire, both beads, to make sure that they look even. And I grabbed a brand new Schrader valve. Some shops you take your bike to, they'll reuse that same Schrader valve forever and always, and I don't understand that either. A new Schrader valve is about 10 cents, so why not put a new Schrader valve in every time you change a tire? Again, Schrader valve, valve stems, tire disposal. The $20 that I charge for a mountain balance, that's what that $20 goes for. Whatever's left over goes into a jar, and when I need a tool, if there's a tool that I don't have and I might need in the future to work on a bike, I just go out and buy it. I know that tool is going to save you money, so it's worth it for me to have. It's worth it for you, for me to have it. If I'm doing your tires, then you must be a friend of mine. So now we're putting this tire on my Derek Weaver tire machine. If you go to the DerekWeaver.com webpage, this is the largest tire machine that Derek Weaver sells. It is more or less for a commercial motorcycle shop. Again, I am not a commercial motorcycle shop, but I do like having great tools, and you are worth it. So I've got the wheel lined up on the shaft. I'm going to remove this sticker. We took off a set of Continental Road Attack tires off of this RC8, and we are putting a brand new set of Bridgestone S22Rs. If you're buying those Chinese made Pirelli Rosso Corsa 3s and spending $500 or $600 on a set of tires, I strongly urge you to go out and buy a set of S22s and give them a try. For about $300 shipped to your house, you're going to find that the S22s are maybe the best tire that you've ever run on. And if $300 is too much, go try out a set of the Dunlop Road Sport 2. Road Sport 2. That's another amazing tire that's out on the market for us these days. You're probably going to like that tire a lot better than you'll like the Pirelli Rosso. Unless you like spending a lot of money on motorcycle tires. I do not. I find I can ride just as good on a $200 set of tires as I can on a $500 set of tires. And sometimes if you get something like the Michelin Pilot Road 5, which is just a terrible tire for riding twisty roads, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I know I'm probably going to get flamed for saying something bad about the PR5, but unless you're riding a lot of interstate highways in the rain, there's no need for anybody to have a Pilot Road 5 or pay the expense for a Pilot Road 5. Any other motorcycle, including a Shinko, can do just as good a job as what the Pilot Road 5 does. But I'm kind of fortunate. I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and I don't have to ride a whole lot of 4-lane roads. Most of the roads that I ride are narrow, small, 2-lane twisty roads, back roads. If there's the twistiest route to get to a destination, I always take it. There you go. There's all zeros, so this wheel is perfectly balanced. Now it's time to install it. So installing the front wheels is usually pretty quick. So we're going to clean everything up. So I got some shop towels and I got my tub of grease. So I'm going to clean up the seals. So any of that grease from the last tire change, I'm going to clean that off the seal so I can put fresh grease in there. And I am using Lubrimatic marine grease. Remember, you don't need a high temperature, ultra high, whatever they call it, graphite, whatever grease for this. Your bearings are already sealed. Your bearings have grease inside of them. The only purpose of this marine grease is to allow the bike to come apart easier in the future. I like using marine grease because if it is good enough for your boat trailer backing in and out of saltwater boat ramps, then this marine grease is going to be more than good enough to protect your axle and your bearings and your seals around your wheels. Just driving down the highway on a bright sunshiny day, because I know as well as you know that if you have a KTM RC8, when you look at the weather report and they say there's a 10% chance of rain in your neighborhood, I know you're not taking your RC8 out on the road. For the 5 of you that own one of these bikes, I guarantee none of those 5 have ever been ridden hard in the rain. So I just lifted up the front wheel, and now I'm going to push the axle through. So we just line it up and just gently push the axle through. It's going to kind of hang when it gets to the lip on the axle where it goes into the front fork. So, give it a couple taps. And then once you're in and all the way through, then you can come over on the other side and you can put your axle nut in. And we're only doing it hand tight at this point. So we're not torquing anything down. We just want to snug everything up. What this is going to do is help line up the front forks. There's going to be some genius who's watching this video who's going to say that I didn't jump up and down on the bike to get the forks into alignment. Every time I hear some fools tell me that, I just shake my head and I go ahead and I delete their comment off of my YouTube. It's just easier. There's really no need to be jumping up and down on the front of the bike to get it into alignment. It's easy enough to put your axle in and just get your axle in hand tight, just loosely, so the bottom of the forks are somewhat in alignment. And then once you get your brake calipers tightened down, that's what we're doing now. I'm just using a Torx head socket and a ratchet, and I'm going to snug them up, and then I'm going to come back with my torque wrench and I'm going to torque down these caliper bolts. And no, I'm never going to put torque specifications in my videos. If I give you the wrong torque specification in the video, then you're going to flame me. So if you want to know what the torque specifications are for the front caliper of your KTM RC8, open up your owner's manual and look it up. If you don't have your owner's manual any longer, go to the interwebs and search it. Google is your friend. You will find the torque specs for this bike. So there you have it. We're tight, we're hand tight right now, and I'm putting a foot-pound torque wrench on here, and we're just going to do it till it clicks. I typically make it click twice, and I do twice on each bolt, and then I come back and I do each bolt one more time, just for, you know, goodness sake. This bike, I don't remember if I went back and did it one time, just because it's so difficult to get that torque socket into the Torx caliper bolt. So yeah, I only did it twice on this bike. Understandable. When you do yours, you'll get it. You'll see what I'm talking about. And I would imagine after your first tire change, you'll be on the interwebs searching for the titanium caliper bolts, because I think that would be the way to go. Is titanium caliper bolts on the front, and just think of the weight savings too. Gosh, between all four of these bolts being replaced with titanium caliper bolts, you might shed a whole ounce off the front of your bike. Help you get that front wheel off the ground a little bit faster. So back over on the right hand side, we're going to go ahead and tighten down the caliper bolts over here. We're almost through. This really is a quick job. Typically I can do a motorcycle like this, a sport bike, if I'm not horsing around talking to people. When my garage doors open, oftentimes a lot of people will come by and they want to talk motorcycles and hang out. I'm good with that, but it slows me down. But usually I can do a sport bike anywhere from about 35 to 40 minutes start to finish, mount and computer balance. And that's not too bad. If you go to a dealership, you can pretty much expect to be standing around the dealership waiting for your bike to be completed for 2 to 3 hours. And you got to remember, you know, that guy in the back, he's going off a book that tells him, you know, how much hourly rate to charge you for a tire change. And on a sport bike, that rate is probably about 2 hours. And that would be about fair. You know, they're getting $100 per wheel to mount and balance on your motorcycle. I think the shop rates in most dealerships are about $125 for an hourly rate. And with the $15 minimum wage, you know, I get it. You know, the people that have the dealerships, they got to eat too. So if you're going to a dealership, you know, just expect to pay a little bit more. The service isn't going to be any better, but so here's how you align everything. Spin the front wheel, and with that wheel going around, you grab a handful of brake. When that brake grabs, it's going to align. It's going to align your front forks. And then once you have your front forks aligned and the front wheel spins, and you know if it's out of alignment. If it's out of alignment, you're going to have all kinds of brake drag. So once you spin that wheel and it spins pretty much freely through those calipers, it's in alignment. Then grab your torque socket on your wrench and tighten down your pinch bolts. Once you get them tightened down with your ratchet, if you're like me and you're just poor, and I'm going to upgrade this one, I think probably pretty soon. This is an inch-pound torque wrench. Inch-pound torque wrench. Your pinch bolts should be tightened down with an inch-pound torque wrench. If your torque spec in your manual calls for foot-pounds, do the math and convert that to inch-pounds. With an inch-pound torque wrench, you're not going to stretch your pinch bolts. You're not going to break off your pinch bolts. Your pinch bolts will be safe on the front of the motorcycle. Inch-pound torque wrench. Anytime you're doing a small bolt, say you have an 8mm hex head bolt that you're tightening down and it calls for 10 foot-pounds, do the math. 120 inch-pounds. Do it with an inch-pound torque wrench and save yourself the hassle of having to drill that bolt out later. So that's your tip for the day. Thanks for watching my video. I hope it was helpful. Enjoy that KTM RC8.